Welcome to another episode of Erik Whiskey Studies, and in this video, gonna do a head-to-head comparison with the Glenturret 10-year-old Peat Smoke and the Springbank 10-year-old Campbeltown Single Malt Scotch Whisky. Glenturret Distillery is located 2 miles or 3 kilometers northwest of Crieff in Perthshire in the Highlands of Scotland on the banks of the Terroir River. The distillery was founded in 1763 and was originally founded as Hosh Distillery and was owned by the Drummond family. In 2018, the distillery was acquired by the Lilly Group from the Edrington Group. Springbank Distillery is located in Campbeltown, Scotland. The distillery was founded in 1828 by the Reed brothers. Today, Springbank is owned by the family company J&A Mitchell and Company, which also owns the Glengall Distillery next door and the independent bottler William Cadenheads. All barley is malted and kilned on site. They use a rake and plow mash tun. They have a direct fire wash still and use both worm tub and shell and tube condensers. Springbank Distillery produces 3 brands: Springbank, which is moderately peated and 2.5 times distilled, Longrow, which is heavily peated and 2 times distilled, and Hazelburn, which is unpeated and triple distilled. The Glenturret 10-year-old Peat Smoke Single Malt Scotch Whisky 2022 release was matured in first fill and second fill European and American oak casks. It is non-chill filtered, has natural color, is bottled at 50% alcohol by volume, and sells for about $80. The Springbank 10-year-old Single Malt Scotch Whisky was 2.5 times distilled, matured in 60% bourbon cask and 40% sherry cask. It is non-chill filtered, has natural color, was bottled in March 16, 2022. It's bottled at 46% alcohol by volume and sells for about $105. Both of these whiskeys are 10 years old, matured in both bourbon and sherry casks. It is non-chill filtered, has natural color. The Glenturret is at 50% alcohol by volume. The Springbank is at 46% alcohol by volume. They were both released in 2022. The Glenturret sells for well under $100 at $80, whereas the Springbank is retailing for $105, although prices may vary depending on where you buy the whiskeys. So before I record this video, I do this head-to-head comparison off camera, make my mental notes, and I gotta say, of all the head-to-head comparison videos I've done, this is the best just in terms of the whiskeys, and also one of the most challenging. These are just absolutely superb whiskeys that really can't be truly enjoyed in the manner in which I'm about to do them in front of a camera. These are whiskeys that really you need to take your time. You need to be patient with them. You need to smell them just a little bit, put it down, come back to it, taste just a little bit, and then come back to it. But if I did that in front of a video, it would be an hour long or longer, and you wouldn't be watching the video because it would get really, real boring. So this sort of quick analysis of these 2 whiskeys in, I don't know, 15 minutes or 10, 15 minutes or whatever, really doesn't do them justice. These are absolutely superb. So if you, as you saw there in the notes, these whiskeys are actually very, very, very similar in terms of age. Obviously, the release date being 2022, the casking, bourbon and sherry cask, and the ABV, one being 50, the other being 46. The biggest difference between these 2 whiskeys, however, isn't the ABV or even necessarily the price. The Springbank 10-year-old was challenging to find for a while. It's now becoming a little easier to find. Springbank has gotten a lot of hype or has become quite popular. I can now get this where I live in Half Moon Bay at a local wine shop. And the prices, they've stabilized. I won't say they've come down, become more affordable, but I'd say they've stabilized. There's no longer the insanity of the price of these anymore. So if the 10-year-old is available in the ballpark figure price in which I get it for about $105, then I would say highly recommend you buy one. The Glenturret 10-year-old peat smoke is a little more challenging, but there are a number of other bottles out there. Glenturret 10-year-old, the first time I tried it, and the first time I pulled the cork, I was just like, wow, this, I mean, just even from the first sniff, this is something absolutely amazing. The layers, the subtleties, the little delicate notes in it is absolutely fantastic. So the biggest difference, though, in between these two, in fact, I'm going to ask you, if you're familiar with Springbank, what do you think is going to be the biggest difference? Yep, if you said funk, you are right. Springbank has just a wee bit of funk. Now, to be honest, when I was first getting into Springbank and I kept hearing the funk, I didn't really know what people were talking about because I wasn't really getting it. But then when I was trying some of the older ones, like say like the 18-year-old, then and the 21-year-old, which is insanely expensive, then I was getting a lot more of that funk. I looked around online, I searched, what is the cause of the funk, because it's not just Springbank. Others report also, although I don't get as much in, say, Glen Scotia and Glengyle, which produces Kilkerran. But it's there, but not as much as in the Springbank. There are a lot of different opinions, views, perspectives on what is the cause of the funk. It does seem to be a local, regional area, something maybe in the air and the terroir. The fact that in that little bay there, maybe there's something there. Maybe it's a yeast, a natural yeast in the air that's getting into the fermentation. I don't know. But it's not the casks, because the distilleries, particularly Glen Scotia, which is under different ownership than Glengyle and Springbank, are using a different source for their casks. But it's there. So on fruit character, on both of these, you get that orange character that you get from like dried oranges that you get in Christmas cake, orange peel. There's a moderate amount of spice, just a slight wafting of smoke interwoven with the fruit character. And on that, these are very, very similar on those. But it's that slight funk, that slight earthy character that you get in the Springbank. Some online commentators think that it might be from the dunnage warehouses that Springbank is in that might give it more of that funk character. I've been to Springbank Distillery twice, went through the Springbank Whiskey School. They now have a new warehouse because they ran out of room. That's a racked warehouse. I think it's like 7 or 8 levels high, and it's not dunnage. If it's the dunnage that is the factor, then the whiskeys matured in those warehouses is not going to have that funk. And I'm going to put money on it because we're not necessarily going to know, okay, this bottle came from the dunnage, this bottle came from the racked warehouse, unless they're rotating them back and forth from the dunnage to the racked warehouse in order to get, so that they all get exposure to the dunnage. But when I was there for 5 days, that's not what was going on. They have like a forklift that's able to raise them up and then put them onto the racks. But if it's the dunnage warehouse, then that's giving that funk, then the whiskeys that come from that racked warehouse aren't going to have those notes. And so once bottles get released, it came from cash from the racked warehouse, people are going to start saying, hey, this doesn't have the funk, and I'm willing to put money on it. They're still going to have that funk because, sure, maybe you could get something up the dunnage warehouse floor, but there are a lot of other dunnage warehouses around Scotland that they might have a little earthy character to them, but Balblair, for example, there's a slight earthy character to say to some of the Balblair releases, but it's not like this. This funk would be a lot more common if that was the driving factor. Of course, it could always be a multitude of factors that this plus this plus this plus this, results in the funky character. everything from the washbacks, the yeast, and then plus the Dunnage warehouse. So they both have sort of an orange character to it, dried oranges, light chocolate. It's almost like a chocolate covered orange or chocolate orange covered candy. Just a mild amount of spice with a little bit of, say, cinnamon, a wafting of smoke that's layered in between them. As I've been talking and I've been going back and forth here, when you take a whiff and you put it down and then you come back to it, you get something different each time. And that is why I said these whiskeys you need to take time with them. Wow. Tasted blind or smelled blind, you could think the Glenturret 10-year-old, you could confuse it with the Springbank if you weren't really mentally focused and honing in and looking for that funk factor. Now visually, they both look really similar. The Glenturret is slightly darker. They both have sort of that gold, copper, orange character. I would say it's maybe hard to pick up on the camera. The Springbank is slightly lighter. Wow. Now, it could also be, if you keep smelling it, that certain notes, you then become immune to it. You're not picking up anymore, like your nose is already full of those notes. So that when you go back to it, now you're picking up something different because you've already absorbed those other characteristics. But these are really layered and complex whiskeys. Let's try them on the palate. I'm going to start with the Glenturret. There's a sweetness, medium intense spice, dried oranges, lemon, light, just very light chocolate, maybe a hint of vanilla. And the evolution, the changes, what you get up front, in the middle, into the finish, it changes, and it's really long finish. I'm going to get some water. These whiskeys don't need any water added to them. If you want to put a drop into it to open up more, you can do that. I just wanted to cleanse my palate in between them. There's a little bit more chocolate note with the Springbank. It's earthier on the palate. It's not quite mushroom, but it's almost there. So it's almost like if you had mushrooms with maybe a little bit of orange marmalade with just a hint of chocolate. And as I'm talking now, I'm sort of exhaling a little bit of smoke. So take a mushroom, put some orange marmalade on it while smoking a cigarette and in a dinky, dusty room, and that is Springbank 10-year-old. Glenturret, just a little bit spicier, just a little bit sweeter. Springbank is a little bit earthier, a little bit more, say, rustic and savory, and has a little bit more of a savory note. But other than that, these are subtle differences. They're actually quite similar. The Glenturret seems, I would say, a little fresher, a little livelier. Springbank, a little earthier, a little more rustic. But even when I had originally tried the Glenturret, to me it seemed very old world, and it made me immediately think of the Springbank. So what do I think about these two? These are superb. These are amazing. What would I give them in terms of a score? I'm going to go 92 points on both of them. I think they are on par with each other in terms of quality, in terms of complexity, layers of flavor, development, mouthfeel, and length of finish. So aromas, flavors, structure, development, and length of finish are very comparable. If you weren't super honed in on those minor, more earthy notes of the Springbank, you could confuse the Glenturret for the Springbank 10. Price-wise, depending on where you're at, there's at least a $20, $25 difference between the Glenturret and the Springbank. Which do I personally prefer? Right now, I prefer the Glenturret because that's more of what I am in the mood for. But there could be another time in which I'm more in the mood for the Springbank. So it's hard to choose one over the other. If I had to choose, absolutely choose one, in terms of difficulty to get, the Glenturret, if you only had money to buy one, I think the Glenturret 10-year-old right now, the peat smoke, might be a little more challenging to get. So if you could only buy one, I would say grab the Glenturret. I think the Springbank 10-year-olds are starting to become more available as more has been released. But both of them are absolutely superb and deserve a lot more time and patience than what I'm able to give them in this video. These are absolutely fantastic. All right, if you have ever tried the Glenturret 10 Peat Smoke and the Springbank 10-year-old, you've tried them both, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. What do you prefer? And do you agree with me that these are at least 90% similar? It's that 10% difference between the two in terms of all the characteristics that really makes the difference between these two. But these are absolutely fantastic. All right, if you've not already, I would ask that you subscribe, ring the bell to be notified when I post a new video. And until next time, Slanja. Hey, don't forget to subscribe and check out these other whiskey videos.